Hello everybody, I'm Laura Yates and I'm one of the primary assistant head teachers here at DBSJP, and today I am going to be sharing with you the parent workshop on how we assess here at JP and how the teachers make their judgments, and we're going to be focusing specifically on reading and writing. So I'm going to start with this quote, and it says, "No single test decides your child's level. Teacher judgment is built from many small pieces of evidence over time." So when the teachers at DBSJP are assessing your children and arriving at their judgment, it comes from lots and lots of small pieces of evidence, what they see in the classroom on a day-to-day basis. It's not decided on one single test outcome. So how do we assess here at DBSJP? So we assess the students using this terminology: working towards, expected, and exceeding. If a student is working towards the curriculum objectives, it means they haven't consistently met the objectives yet, so they're still trying to work towards them. If they are working expected, it means they're secure within that year group objective. And if they're exceeding, that means they're working beyond the year group objectives in depth and independence. Now remember, being exceeding is not about speed or higher test scores alone. So part one, we're going to focus on how we assess reading, and part two, we're going to discuss how we assess writing. So let us start by looking at how or what we assess the students on in reading. So we assess the students on the UK National Curriculum reading objectives, and they're broken down into two parts. The first part is word reading. So we assess the children on: can they decode accurately? Can they read with appropriate pace and expression? Can they automatically recognise familiar words? We also assess the students on part two, their reading comprehension. So can they infer? Can they predict? Can they retrieve information? Can they summarise information? Can they recognise unfamiliar vocabulary? Can they explain author's intent? They form our VIPers. Here you can see each of the reading objectives or areas along the top row. So we've got our word reading, which I have already spoken about, and then our reading comprehension skills of vocabulary, inference, prediction, explain, retrieve, and summarise along the top. And you can see down the left-hand column, we've got our year groups. So you can see for each reading skill or objective, you can see how that progresses through each year group. Okay, so for example, if we take prediction, you can see what prediction looks like in year one, right through to year 6. Now we've identified what we're assessing the students against, the UK National Curriculum objectives for reading. We're now going to discuss how we assess the students against those objectives. So teachers will assess your children against those objectives using formative assessment. So this is what the teachers see on a day-to-day basis in school, in the classroom. So this might be when teachers are listening to the students read aloud. They might be assessing the students then on their reading fluency or decoding or expression. The teachers will be assessing the students when they're talking and discussing about books, when they are listening to students read in a group or one-to-one. They'll be assessing the students then on their reading comprehension, asking them questions. They will be able to assess the students against those objectives through their written responses that they write in their books and through their independent reading choices as well. So there's lots and lots of opportunity for teachers on a day-to-day basis to assess the students against those objectives. Teachers don't just use formative assessment to assess the students against the objectives, they also use summative assessment. So these are more formal tests. So you can see in the table below all the different summative assessments that we have here at DBSJP, which allows teachers to also support them with their judgment. Remember that tests support the judgment, okay? They don't replace it. So they use the formative assessment that we just discussed, things that they see on a day-to-day basis, but also summative assessment, so more formal tests as well, to arrive at that overall judgment. So we have things like our phonics screener, we have NGRT, we have our STAR reader test, which is part of accelerated reader, and we have our GL progress tests as well. So these are all different summative assessment tests that help teachers form their overall judgment for a student on their reading ability. So here's a visual of how a teacher would come to a judgment when it comes to where a student or how a student is performing in reading. So a teacher would decide if a student is working towards those objectives, meeting the objectives or exceeding them, okay? And they would be using those formative assessments, that day-to-day classroom practice, and summative assessments, so those tests that we just discussed, as well as written work that they might see, independent reading that the students are doing at home, and discussions that they might hear. All of those different parts would come together to form the teacher judgment overall. We're just going to have a little look at an example now. This is a fake student profile, and you can see here, if you read through the profile, their assessment scores, so their summative assessment scores, and also a little bit of information at the bottom about how they are performing in class. So their formative assessment. So I want you to have a little read through and think about what judgment you think the teacher would arrive at with that set of information. So would this student here be working towards the curriculum, meeting the curriculum, or exceeding the curriculum for reading? And any questions you'd still have. Now remember, as discussed previously, teacher judgment is formed with lots of pieces of evidence, not just tests. Let's move on now and have a little look at writing. And again, these are the national curriculum objectives for writing. So these are the objectives that we're assessing the students against for each year group. So you can see the year 1 objectives, the year 2 objectives, and if we flick onto the next page, you can see the year 3 and 4 writing objectives. And you can see the year 5 and 6 writing objectives too. So these are all the objectives from the UK national curriculum that we assess your children against. Again, teachers will form their judgment based on formative assessment. And in writing, a lot of it is formative assessment. It's that day-to-day writing. The teachers will be talking to the children as they write. They will be looking at the success criteria or checklists that they're given. Are they including those features from the success criteria in their writing? Are they responding to feedback and improving their writing? How are they performing in short burst writing tasks as well as lengthier pieces? So a teacher would be assessing a student's writing and what they see in the classroom on a day-to-day basis. Teacher will constantly be assessing students and how they're doing in their writing on a day-to-day. Now, with writing, there are no summative assessments as such. There's no tests, there's no black and white answers. So students will build up to a piece of writing at the end of each half term. And when a student has written that final piece, it's important that teachers moderate the piece of writing. So this is where teachers would come together to look at pieces of writing to ensure that teachers agree on those judgments, to ensure that judgments are fair and consistent and that children are getting judged against the same expectations. We want to ensure that judgments are accurate. So that's why teachers would come together, share pieces of writing, and moderate to make sure that those pieces of writing are judged accurately and correctly, to make sure judgments are fair and consistent across the year group and across the school. Here you can see on the left-hand side some examples of Year 2 writing. You can see the objectives, the Year 2 objectives that the students are being assessed against. Can you take a look? Can you read through those pieces of writing if you can see them clearly, and see which of the objectives the students are demonstrating in their piece of writing? So this is exactly what a teacher would do. They would read through the writing and check against the objectives as to which objectives the students are including in their writing. Again, if students are demonstrating they are meeting or including those objectives, they would be meeting curriculum expectations. Perhaps they're not including some of them, therefore the piece of writing would be judged as working towards, but maybe the student is including all of the objectives and going above and beyond, including objectives or features that are perhaps in Year 3 or Year 4, therefore the student would then be deemed as exceeding. So how can parents support at home? So for reading and writing, the biggest way that parents could support at home is encouraging students to read. Read as much as possible. That is going to help support with vocabulary, with spelling, with imagination and ideas, for inspiration for writing. Encourage the children at home to talk about books and discuss books, and read a range of genres as well. Fiction, non-fiction, exposure to everything. When listening to your children read, make sure you're not only discussing the books, but asking them comprehension questions to test their understanding, asking them why and how questions, to get them to think deeper, not just surface level questions, and what questions we call them. And I just want to finish with this quote. It says, "My child reads quickly, so should be exceeding." I want you to think about whether or not you think that is a myth or whether you think that's true. Just because a child reads quickly, does that mean they are exceeding? Hopefully, you will know that just because a child reads fast, it does not mean that they are exceeding reading curriculum objectives, because the students need to be able to understand, comprehend what they're reading to be exceeding in reading itself. A couple of the other quotes say, "Tests decide everything." As discussed, and that's the biggest message from this parent workshop, is that when we assess here at DBSJP, it is not based just on one test solely. We make our judgment from multiple pieces of evidence. Tests play one part of it, okay, but it's what the students do on a day-to-day basis in the classroom and what that teacher sees every day that helps support and form that judgment, not just tests. Thank you so much for listening, and if you've got any more questions about assessment, how we assess here at DBSJP, please do not hesitate to get in touch. Thank you for listening.